Thank you for joining us for tonight's webinar. We're going to have the Hap-Hap-Happiest Christmas. I'm Mac Ingram, Director of Engagement, Alumni and Students in the Office of Alumni Affairs. Since we're virtual tonight, please excuse any technical issues or glitches that may pop up. If you have issues with your video or audio, click the reconnect button to get back to the webinar right away. This webinar is being recorded and will have a replay available tomorrow. Also, if you have a question during tonight's presentation, drop it in the chat. We'll have time for a Q&A at the end. I'm going to go ahead and I want to launch a poll before I welcome our guest tonight. You're all going to see a poll pop up that is, what is your favorite Christmas movie? So please take a second to let us know, and we'll go over those results in just a second. But tonight we welcome Gareth Jones to our webinar series. Gareth has taught film studies for more than a decade and currently serves as director of the Office of Service Learning and Undergraduate Research. He earned his bachelor's, he earned his bachelor's degree in film studies from the University of Utah in 1995 and a Master of Arts in Film Studies from Holland University in 2007. Gareth has worked for the Sundance Film Festival for more than 2 decades and has volunteered for the Sidewalk Film Festival for 7 years. Gareth, I'm so glad to have you. Before I turn it over to you, I do want to see what these results are telling us as they're coming in. It looks like there is overwhelming percentage, which, obviously we're here for National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. We have 61% there on that. And then our next highest is It's a Wonderful Life at 23%. We have A Christmas Story at 7%, and a couple others getting a couple votes, but those are the overwhelming choices at this time.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. To you, Mac, for helping out tonight, Emma Grace and Greg, the whole team. So I'm really grateful for being here tonight to talk with folks. So I am a professor, so we are going to have kind of a PowerPoint slide with the usual kind of agenda with kind of a lecture approach. But feel free at any point, drop something in the chat. And I'd love to, have this be interactive and we can have kind of a conversation as we go along, or you can save it to the end and we'll have a Q&A at the end. So in addition to the things that Mac talked about in my introduction, I'm also a co-host of a radio show called Sleep in Cinema on the internet station Substrate Radio. Every Saturday morning, I talk about films with guests, often guests from UAB. So just want to promote that as well. But yeah, I'm also been teaching here for quite a while here at UAB, and also I'm the director of the Office of Service Learning and Undergraduate Research. So I love to help students find those opportunities and faculty develop them. So, but let's get to the agenda for tonight, our list for tonight. So first thing, it was really exciting to have that poll here at the start, where we kind of took a little pulse to see what your favorite Christmas movie is. No surprise, obviously, with what we're talking about tonight, that National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation came out on top. But we'll talk about the past 3 years about what came out on top in Alabama and all across the nation here at the start of my presentation. Then I'll give you a little bit of background information on the film. A little bit quick tutorial on film criticism 101. Give you a few tricks for analysis. Then we'll talk about the genre of the holiday movie and what makes a film a holiday movie. And then we'll have a few final thoughts to kind of wrap things up. So that will be what we will be talking about tonight. So first, just to kind of look back a couple of years, it's really interesting to me, since I am the director in the Office of Service Learning Undergraduate Research, I love to look at research. And so I was able to find a service that has been polling and taking stock of what the favorite films are, what Christmas favorite films are across the nation. And you can see this was back in 2021. And if you can see here, you may not be able to see it too well, but here in Alabama in 2021, Home Alone came out on top as the #1 film that's being streamed or watched here in Alabama. But you can see there's a lot of different films represented here, from Gremlins to Nightmare Before Christmas, Edward Scissorhands, Batman Returns, Up here in the corner, we have Die Hard. I think we'll probably be talking about Die Hard at some point tonight. It is a point of contention within this world. We have older films like White Christmas here. Here we have Christmas Story all over the place. Christmas Carol. So some really interesting Trading Places, The Apartment. It's amazing when you start to think about how many different films are often classified as a Christmas film or a holiday movie. So this was back in 2021. Then in 2022, we can see there were some changes. 2022 was a banner year for tonight's film. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, as you can see, dominated the nation last year in streaming. It's these figures obviously are influenced by what is available. Very often if a top streaming company gets the exclusive rights to a particular film, then a lot of people watch it because a lot of people have Netflix, for example, or maybe Amazon Prime, and if it's available there, people are going to watch it more. You see a few here that we talked about earlier, but still see Die Hard. Here's Love Actually making an appearance, The Shop Around the Corner. So still, It's a Wonderful Life still making an appearance. But yeah, last year was the year of National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, which brings us to this year's data. And we can see that Christmas Story took the top spot here in Alabama and actually did pretty much dominated the entire nation again. We see Charlie Brown Christmas made an appearance here. How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the original Christmas Carol. So still some variety there, but you can see that those Bunny Ears and A Christmas Story, which I think came in third in our poll that we just took behind It's a Wonderful Life, which still always pops up. So that's kind of an interesting thing to start our conversation with, is how we have perennial favorites that stick with us, but we also have new ones that are often discovered or rediscovered. And again, I think the landscape has changed tremendously. I mean, many of us may remember that it used to be a time that these would play only once a year on one specific day, when we'd watch, How the Grinch Stole Christmas on ABC on a Saturday night with our family. Whereas now you could watch it 20 times in December, as much as you want, through a streaming platform. So times have changed with the world that we're living in now. But so let's get to tonight's film, though. Let's really start to focus on why I'm making the argument that National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation is the quintessential Christmas film. And we'll get to some of the specifics of that here in just a moment when we talk about what conventions and expectations and requirements we may have for what qualifies something as a Christmas film. But just to give you a little bit of more information about this film, significantly, it was released on December 1st in 1989, right at the end of the 80s. The 80s was an amazing decade for many Christmas films. I am absolutely a child of the 80s. I was born in 1971. So for me, the nostalgia connected with so many of the films that were released in the 1980s, including Christmas Vacation. I have a lot of nostalgia for that time. And it's always interesting to think what was happening kind of culturally in 1989. We're just right after the wall has come down. We are right at the end of Reagan's era, where just a lot of different things were happening in the late 80s. Right before MTV was huge back in those days. But as you can see, this was the third in a series. So the first National Lampoon's Vacation came out in 1983, was directed by Harold Ramis, is written by John Hughes. We'll talk about John Hughes a little bit here in just a moment. Also, and the main cast has stayed throughout the first three films, with Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo as the Griswolds, as Clark and his Ellen, his ever-suffering wife. And when the first one came out, it was a huge success. So obviously they had to make some sequels. There was European Vacation, which was directed by Amy Heckerling, and then in 1989, the third in the series came out. It received mixed reviews, but it was a tremendous financial success when it came out. It had about a $29 million budget, I believe, but made over $70 million in box office when it came out, which is a pretty good return on a film. And of course, since then, it's made millions upon millions more in many different releases, whether on VHS or DVD or Blu-ray or through streaming. Yeah, absolutely. And I put cult here in parentheses because originally it had a bit of a cult status, but I think it really has moved beyond being just a cult movie and has become part of the canon, if you will, of Christmas films, and doesn't necessarily have that cult status anymore. I think most people know about it. It's played ubiquitously over the holidays, and so that's why I put that in parentheses there. This film was directed by Jeremy Chechik. This was his first film. Jeremy Chechik made his early career in commercials. He did so well with commercials that the great director Stanley Kubrick contacted him and said, "You need to make feature-length films," and actually helped him get into the Hollywood system. And so this was his first film, and he selected it because he had never made a comedy. He'd made very serious dramas and such before that, so this was his first attempt at a comedy. But even more significantly, again, I want to talk about John Hughes here. So John Hughes wrote this film. You may or may not know this series was based on some short stories that John Hughes wrote for the National Lampoon's magazine. So he wrote Vacation 58, which was the basis for the first in the series, and then he wrote one called Christmas Vacation 59 or Vacation 59, which was the basis for this film. But you may or may not know John Hughes dominated the 80s. Whether he was writing films, directing films, producing films, he was behind so many beloved classics from that decade. Things like Pretty in Pink and 16 Candles, Some Kind of Wonderful. I could go on and on about the many films that he wrote or directed. And he would go on to dominate the early parts of the 90s. In 1990, a little film called Home Alone came out, which he also was behind. So John Hughes really is the voice behind so many films from the 1980s, including the Vacation trilogy. And I feel like this film, more than the other two, really connects to his vision of family, his connection of or vision of how we celebrate the holidays. And I think he does an amazing job with that. The stars of the film, again, we talk about Chevy Chase. Chevy Chase in the 80s, again, was a dominant figure in comedies coming out of the Saturday Night Live group. Was a huge financial attraction in many films from the Fletch series. I could go on and on, but he was a huge moneymaker. Beverly D'Angelo, a really good go-to actress during that era, had made many other films, but really, this is probably one of the films she's most known for. Now, interestingly, this is one of the fun facts, of course, about the Vacation series, is they have different actors portray their two children throughout the series. So it's never the same people, which is humorous. I think it's kind of this inside joke that we're just going to recast them every single time we make one of these movies. But in this case, you had two future stars, Juliette Lewis and Johnny Galecki. Juliette Lewis is still a phenomenal actress, making movies and television. Johnny Galecki is probably most well known for television, but this was their first start, and so really launched their careers. The supporting cast, I list Randy Quaid first because, to be completely honest, he's my favorite character as Cousin Eddie throughout the whole series, and his wonderful wife Miriam Flynn. So you have these two actors who play this dynamic duo that are incredible comic timing, and I think an essential part of the experience. But behind them, you have all these incredible Hollywood royalty in many ways. E.G. Marshall, Diane Ladd, Doris Roberts, William Hickey, Mae Questel, who you may know as the voice of Betty Boop, and of course a new actor on the scene, also from Saturday Night Live, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who of course went on to make Seinfeld and Veep and so many other things. So incredible cast, deep cast. This again, they each get their moment to shine in this film and contribute mightily to our overall enjoyment of it. I also want to highlight that the music is by Angelo Badalamenti, who does a fantastic job with this score, but is most well known for collaborating with David Lynch with the Twin Peaks series and several of his films. And so it's kind of interesting that here he wrote the score for this comedy in addition to being well known for these more avant-garde pieces where he worked with David Lynch. So that's just, again, a little bit of background information there about the film. And I just want to show these photos here real quick. I think they're fascinating. This is from the original publications when the short stories came out, written by John Hughes. Again, just as a visual point, you know, if you've seen the original Vacation, you can see some connection there. And then here is the picture for Christmas '59. You can see the family there. You can find these on the internet if you want to read them. I will say that they haven't necessarily aged well. I think Christmas Vacation has aged pretty well, but the writing here, like for example, this character is unfortunately an extremely racist depiction of an Asian person who actually then was an influence for a character in 16 Candles. If you've seen that film, there's a character in that has not aged well at all. But it's still fascinating to go back and read the original source for these films. So there's the background information. Now I just want to give you a little bit of kind of a little quick tutorial. I don't want to get too fancy or too obnoxious here, but you know, film criticism, I like to use these quotes when I talk to my students just to give them some perspective. So this first quote is from Pauline Kael, one of the most famous film critics, wrote for New York Magazine for many years, was really could make or break a film for many years as a critic. And as you can see, she has a very specific opinion about what the role of the critic is. As it says here, in the arts, the critic is the only independent source of information. The rest is advertising. And of course, during her era, the role of the critic really was important for curatorial purposes. People would definitely read the reviews every week. I was near the tail end of that. I read definitely specific reviewers, and I knew their personalities, and so it really influenced what I would go see in the theater. Now, this next quote is from Richard Linklater, who is a filmmaker, still making great films today, known for Dazed and Confused, the Before trilogy, Boyhood, phenomenal filmmaker. And so he has a slightly different approach to film criticism. He says, it's hard to see a film one time and really get it, and then write fully and intelligently about it. That's a review. That's not film criticism. So he really emphasizes, and this is something I do talk to my students a lot, that it is through multiple viewings that we really gain a deeper understanding and can really break down and analyze a film properly. And so obviously that's a really important thing to consider when you're looking at holiday films, Christmas films, is these are things we watch over and over. That's part of the reason they're Christmas films, right? Next, we have the great Jean-Luc Godard, one of the greatest directors of all time from the French New Wave. Actually just died earlier this year. So he obviously has a very specific opinion too. He says that every film is the result of the society that produced it. That's why the American cinema is so bad now. It reflects an unhealthy society. Again, when I ask students to look at films, we always do consider, from the culture that it was made, the country that produced it. These are good things to consider. Now, I may disagree with Mr. Godard here about American cinema, but I think he does have some point that it is good to consider that when you're looking at these films. Now, another great filmmaker who I love, Werner Herzog, great German director. He has a slightly different approach than Jean-Luc Godard. In fact, he really is responding to Jean-Luc Godard here by saying someone like Jean-Luc Godard is, for me, intellectual counterfeit money when compared to a good kung fu film. So, all that being said, everyone has an opinion. We all love to critique and think about films and talk about films. That's why we're here tonight. But I always like to have students just think about other perspectives and be respectful of each other's opinions and all those sorts of things. And so that's how I'll kind of start our discussion here. So hopefully by the end of this, we won't be like Cousin Eddie and we can analyze a film without being obnoxious. All right, so a couple quick things, again, that I teach my students to look at when you're analyzing a film. So here we have this lovely postcard marketing tool for the film, but one of the important things when you're thinking about a film is what is the narrative? What's the story that they're telling? But it's also interesting to think about what is the difference between plot and story. And there is a difference, and I think it's significant for tonight's film. So just real quickly, the difference between plot and story is the plot is what happens from the first second of the film to the last second of the film, the linear actions that unfold before you as you watch the film. Story is things that are alluded to that happen outside of that time frame, that people reference, often with dialogue, or could be a flashback. Because that's what really makes a narrative even richer, is when there is a deep story, right? And often, for example, action films are often seen as pure plot. All we do is watch one action after another, and there's very little character development, and we don't have a great story, and that's so some of us don't connect to that, right? And then other things may be just pure story and don't have a plot, and we're like, well, nothing really happened in that film, just a lot of people talking, and they just kept talking. And so that may be too heavy on story. Most Hollywood films have a pretty even balance of this because they want people to connect to the films. They want them to understand them. They want them to leave with a good feeling. So they usually have a pretty good balance on this. And I think that's true with tonight's film, with Christmas Vacation. I think we get a very strong plot. We start right, we have that lovely cartoon at the first, but then we're right in the middle of it with them, the Griswolds, getting the family tree. But we also know about what's happened in the previous films, part of the story that we have already connected with these characters beforehand. And when Eddie shows up on the scene, we immediately recall the story that happened before. And any time that someone references an action or an event that happens outside of it, we get a richer understanding of the story. So I think Christmas Story, or Christmas Vacation, excuse me, Christmas Story, another great example of a lot of story and a lot of plot. But I think it's interesting to think about that balance that Christmas Vacation has, much like the balance here Ellen has, and the balance of this photo. So what are they trying to say? And that's something we think a lot about with this particular genre, the holiday film. What is the major theme? And here in this picture, we have Clark and Ellen, and Clark looking at the lights that he has worked so hard to put up, and how frustrated he has been. And now finally they are working, and how she's looking up at him admirably. He's finally achieved his goal, right, of having the lights and having some family experience together, some love and affection and respect, that he's been searching for throughout the film. And here is a moment where it culminates. And there's a lot that is said here in this image about what that theme is, that theme of family and togetherness and overcoming diversities that that happen, and obstacles that are thrown in the way. So all of those things that happen now at this moment has come to fruition, and he has this moment. And ultimately, that's a theme that often occurs in John Hughes films, right? It's all about all the challenges that we have as family, but ultimately we love each other, we connect with each other, we're human beings, and we learn a lot through that process. So that is one thing that is always good to think about when you're watching a film. So other things that are really significant, especially in genre films, are motifs. Motifs are simply repeated elements that take on meaning or are symbolic because of this repetition. And so even in this picture, we see some motifs that we expect when we say a Christmas movie. So we obviously have a Christmas tree with decorations and the Santa hat. So even Mac fulfilled that expectation that we had. And this backdrop that I have behind me, again, you expect Christmas lights in a Christmas movie. You expect snow. So already you're probably thinking of other things that are repeated throughout Christmas films, that they take on additional significance and become symbolic. So that's another thing to look for when you're analyzing the film, to make sure those motifs are there and how the filmmakers are using them. This is a fancy term, mise en scène, but that simply means what is in the frame. So what all the decisions that the filmmakers make of what you will see in the frame of the camera is really significant. And I often ask students to freeze frame a film and really analyze, well, what is in that picture? If someone has made a decision about everything that is in this picture, from the costumes to the production design to where people are placed in the shot, whether we have a medium shot, a close-up, the lighting, all of these decisions that go into what we see is the mise en scène. So when you look at films and analyze films, looking at the mise en scène is a great way to analyze them. And as you can see in this picture, we've got a lot of motifs. We've got a lot of symbolic elements. We've got Santa there with the decorations. We've still got the tree. We've got Clark wearing his sweater with his fancy Christmas tie. We've got Cousin Eddie in an absolutely wonderful suit. We've got all these incredible things like that. So all of those things that went into that help us understand the film better. So the genre. So when you're looking at films, obviously genres are just simply a way for us to categorize films. Just like with books and music, it gives us an understanding before we go to a film, right? We are going to have expectations of what we're going to see, the conventions of the genre that have been developed over time. We have an expectation for that, right? And if we don't see those things, we're disappointed, or we might make the argument, this is not a holiday film. It does not have the usual conventions, the usual suspects of what I would expect when I watch that film. However, as genres evolve, it's important to think about this concept that Steve Neal came up with, his genre theory of repetition and difference. Another way of thinking about that is the same but different, right? That we want to have just enough that's the same so that we have some comfort level with it. But we also want something different. We don't want the same thing over and over and over, right? Think about the superhero genre right now. There's a lot of discussion of superhero fatigue, that it's kind of reached a point where we've already seen it, it's already been done, we need something different, right? We need something to really come in and shake up the genre and change it. And that's where really innovative filmmakers can come in and say, yes, this genre has existed for a long time, that I've got new ideas, new perspectives, new film techniques, and I'm really going to shake it up so that it'll be recognizable as something that you know, but it's going to be different at the same time. And that's what really, that's when people want to spend money to go see these films, right? So let's get to what actually makes a holiday film a genre, this genre. And this is a fairly recent thing in film theory and film analysis, to really look at the holiday film as a genre unto itself. I have this lovely textbook here that I use somewhat, the Christmas book, really good textbook that goes into the conventions and expectations of a holiday film. And so I'm going to go into those kind of individually here, and we'll see if, and I think we definitely will see that Christmas Vacation has all of these elements. And so therefore, that's, again, the argument that I'm making, that this is the quintessential holiday or Christmas movie. So the first thing is when it is set. So our expectations, obviously, is that if we have a Christmas movie, it is set around Christmas. If it is not set around Christmas, it may be instantly disqualified. So, and also, does it have to be cold? Do we have to have snow? Do we have to, have people in sweaters and, or in this, is it cold out? Is the question from the saleswoman here. Yes, I think that's absolutely a really crucial element of a Christmas film, of a holiday film, that it needs to be set during the holiday season, right? So that would absolutely be one of the first requirements that we would say, is that it needs to be set during the holiday season. Now, that may look different in different countries, right? So in Australia, Christmas season does not have snow. It is the middle of summer. So an Australian culture may say, yeah, this is a Christmas movie, but it doesn't have any snow. But for them, it absolutely is a Christmas movie. But for us, we may say, well, there's no snow. So something to think about. But yes, it does need to be around the holiday, though. I think that's the crucial element. So when it is released, now, this is really interesting when you look at this in film history, because, we've gone through the pandemic that really changed how films were released. And even before that, with the internet, all sorts of things have adjusted how films are distributed and when things are released. Now, when I grew up in the 1980s, and when this film came out, absolutely in December, you could count on several films being released that were Christmas themed films. And so this coming out on December 1st absolutely was a crucial element. Now, on the other side, I'll bring up Die Hard again, and we'll talk maybe a little bit about Die Hard in our Q&A here. Die Hard came out in June, but many people today, not the majority, but many people would make a strong argument that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Although the survey that I showed earlier of the top films, they also surveyed that question to the same audience. And just so you know, as of last year, nationally, 53 or 59.21% of people believe that Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. So 40.75 believe it is, but 59.21% say no, it is not a Christmas movie. And here in Alabama, it's even less. Only 36% of people consider Die Hard a movie. And maybe it's that release date that's part of their argument, right? And what's funny, our neighbors, Mississippi and Louisiana, are even lower. 17%, only 17% of people in those states think that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. They're pretty strict in those states, I would say. Whereas North Dakota, 76% of people in North Dakota thought that Die Hard was a film. So some fun things to think about there. Next, how much of the narrative leans into the holiday, the content, the story that we just talked about, the plot and the story, how much of it really leans into the holiday? Well, with Christmas Vacation, it is absolutely leaning into it. It is by far the majority of the story that happens right from the very start, as we can see here, where they're underneath the giant 18-wheeler after they are trying to get their Christmas tree. That most things in this, almost right from the start, it all revolves around the holiday season. So it 100% leans into it. Also, again, our expectations of Christmas, a family getting together, all of the celebration that goes around it, from the lights to the food, everything. So every plot point is connected in some way to the holiday season. So I think from that perspective, again, check Holiday Vacation absolutely has it. So far, I'd say we're 3 for 3. Nostalgia. So this image right here, I think, looks like a Norman Rockwell picture on purpose. That's part of the mise en scène, right? Just to use that term we had. Nostalgia plays a really important part in holiday films, both for us as an audience about the film, but also for characters in the film. And I'm sure you can think about moments within Christmas Vacation that have nostalgia. And that's because holidays are so intertwined with family experiences that we all have nostalgia for our childhood in so many different ways, from obviously family members to foods that we ate to films that we watched. All of these different things, smells, so many things that are nostalgic for us. So nostalgia is really a crucial part of a holiday film, and it plays a huge part in this film. You probably remember when Clark is up in the attic, gets locked in there, but he watches the films from 1959, a nice allusion to the original text that it's based on. So leaning into the nostalgia is a huge part of a holiday film. There is what I was just talking about. There's Clark freezing, but finding some good clothes to wear up there in the attic, and he watches the film there until, of course, someone opens the attic door and he falls down. But also, who we watch a film with is really important. And I think for holiday films, watching films with family, so in this way, it opens up our definition considerably. So there are certain films that may not be holiday films for other people, but for your family, it 100% is, because you watch it every year with your family around Christmas or around your holiday. So who we watch it with is really significant, right? So think about that as well. And again, I think for many people, probably many of the people who responded that this is their favorite film, part of that is because they've watched it with family. And the humorous parts, when you are laughing to the point of crying with family, that's a bonding experience. I have many of those with my family, and I'm building those with my own children as well. So who we watch it with is really important. And where we watch it is also hugely significant here. And as you can see from this picture, for many of you, if you live here in Birmingham, maybe you go to the Alabama Theater every year for their Christmas film series, and you watch films with your family. I can tell you it's hugely popular. I was looking at their ticket site today, and every screening of Christmas Vacation has sold out. They only have tickets for a few screenings left for some of the other films, and they expand their screenings every year. This becomes more and more popular. It has become a tradition for many families to go to the Alabama Theater and watch Elf or A Christmas Story, or Die Hard is one that they show. So who you watch it with and where you watch it. Now, that could be at home too. Maybe you have an old VHS copy or a DVD, or now you are streaming it. Maybe you watch the Hallmark movies on the Hallmark channel. Maybe you watch Christmas movies that are released on Netflix, and if they're a Netflix release, they're still there the next year. So you watch it again at home, the comfort of your home. Maybe you have a great home theater, or maybe you watch it on your phone. There's so many different ways to watch a film and where you watch it. But I think for holiday films, when you watch it with family in a specific place and you have that tradition, it really enriches the experience and connects you to it even more. So that leads me to some of my final thoughts. And so for all of those, I think check, 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 check. National Lampoon's Holiday Vacation or Christmas Vacation hits all of those check marks and is therefore for me the quintessential holiday film. So I've gone over all of those elements, but you may have films that only hit a few of the check marks, but for you, they are tradition. They are part of your holiday experience. And so that's why I put don't judge there at the very end, because everyone has different experiences. We all come from different backgrounds, and we may have a specific film that for us is a holiday tradition and has become a holiday film for us. So those are my final thoughts. And I just also want to quickly plug, shameless plugs here at the end again, for my radio show, which is Sleep In Cinema on Saturday. So if you enjoyed my talking today, you can hear me talk every week from 9 to 10. There's ways to follow us. So I really appreciate you listening, and I'd love to open it up now. And I see Mac is there. So yeah, if you have any questions or comments, now's the time to chat.
Gareth, that was awesome. Thank you again. That info was great. I have a funny story, but while we get to that, please be sure to toss your questions in the chat right now. If you have anything, we'll be sure to get to them right now. But I do want to say, Gareth, as you said, it matters who you watch it with. This movie actually holds a special place in my heart because this is actually what my wife and I watched on our first date. We went out to dinner, and then we came back and watched Christmas Vacation because we both loved it so much. And so I don't know if you can bond any more than that. So I ended up marrying her. I guess it was because she knew every line in the movie.
Wow, that's fantastic.
You know, I'm sure there's not many stories like that out there, but did have to mention that for sure. I do have one question, and again, to drop those in the chat. We'll get to them right now. But do you think, in today's world and, the way movies are made and these kind of things, do you think we'll ever see a movie like this again?
That's a great question, and it's one that I've been reading about because there are people theorizing that the last great one was Elf, many people think, that really connected and resonated with a large audience. I think we're still going to get great holiday movies, but I don't know if we're going to continue to get ones like this, like Holiday Vacation, because of how they were made. It's just a different world with streaming right now. We have so many things that we can watch and participate in. People are returning to watch movies in the theater, not at the same level that they were before. I am a huge advocate for that. Obviously, I believe going and watching a movie in a movie theater in the dark, in that shared experience, that there's nothing like that. And so I advocate for that with my students. They may go watch Citizen Kane on their telephone, on their phone, but for me, it's still nothing can compete. And so I would even, if you see something on the small screen, if you get a chance to see it on the big screen, do that, and maybe support some of these new ones. But there aren't those releases. No, not on the big screen. I think if you look at the film, The Holdovers is one that just came out this year that many people are saying could be a new one because it is set around the holiday season. It really leans into that, and it's been released here around the holiday season, so it's already hitting some of those marks. But it came and went. It's already gone to VOD, video on demand. It won't stick around. Films like this used to stick around for months. I'm sure you remember probably too that films in theaters used to last a long time. Now things do go into streaming, but they also disappear, or they rotate between one streaming site to the next. So it's difficult to build that tradition. That's why, again, I love what the Alabama Theater does. Sidewalk Cinema also has a great film series, and it's just a great way to connect with people.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think about some of the movies that are made nowadays and the budgets that are spent on these things. I would imagine the budget for this movie was not as high as what they are these days.
No, I mean it was considered expensive for a comedy at the
Yeah,
time,
yeah,
and part of that was paying the cast. I mean, Chevy
yep,
Chase was really
absolutely.
expensive back then, and so it had a good budget. Warner Brothers fully supported it. Comedies don't get quite that same budget nowadays,
Yeah,
especially with the streaming world.
absolutely.
Even the biggest names, like an Adam Sandler, for example, he has straight to Netflix.
Yeah,
It's just a different order. I mean, like
yep,
his new animated movie. That's another one. People are like, oh, is this a Christmas movie? It's tough.
absolutely.
Yeah,
I get it. I get it. Okay, so we got a few questions I'm gonna run down. So,
awesome.
what one says is this movie? Would you say this movie is actually good, or is it just nostalgic and part of a routine now for most people?
That's a great question. So, if I put on my objective film critic hat, I would say aspects of it absolutely are extremely effective. So if I had students study it, I would if they were breaking it down, I would say, yeah, look at what John Hughes does with his script here, or look at how Chevy Chase is performing. Look at how the music blends beautifully with the scene and really changes our emotion as an audience. So from that perspective, it's extremely effective. It's very well made, right?
Mhm.
Um, is it a great movie? Probably not. But that's not necessary for a holiday film. And again, I release like a top 10 film every year, and I usually gravitate to sometimes more indie or art house fare. But I also have a real fondness for really well-made Hollywood films, and I think that's what this is. And this one, even more than the other vacation series, I think has aged well.
Mhm.
Rewatching it before this, I thought, man, some of this, I was a little worried because you never know when you watch an '80s film. You're like, oh, okay, well, things have changed. But I think it has aged well,
Yeah,
and yeah, so I think it's a good film. I don't think it's a great film. Hopefully that answers that person's
absolutely.
question.
Absolutely. Okay, so the next question is was it a trend at the time for the trailer to show almost every key part of the movie?
That's one reason I wanted to show it. Yeah, you know, and that's something. It was really bad back then. Let me just say, not necessarily that was a trend. But and I see who said that. Oh, thanks, Michelle. Um, I think that's improved over time. Again, I think our expectations have changed
Mhm.
of what should be in a preview. And it's so hard now, right? To keep in the dark, right? If we're excited about a movie, there's so much that's out there on the internet through social media. You have to. It's almost impossible to not
Yep.
learn anything about a movie before you go see it. But in the '80s, it was absolutely a way that they brought people in.
Yeah.
And I think when I was talking about all those conventions that people would expect in a holiday movie, and also a Chevy Chase movie, it throws all of that in there, and they didn't care if they gave away part of it.
Yeah.
They knew, and I think they knew with this one that some of it doesn't matter if you're still
Hmm.
gonna laugh really hard. I mean, Cousin
Absolutely.
Eddie getting up for the grace.
Yep.
I mean, his performance looking like this little kid. I love Randy Quaid there. And even though it's in the preview, I still every time I watch it, I just laugh.
Oh,
Love
I'm
it.
with you.
Yeah.
Never, none of it ever gets old. Okay, so here's another question we got. Can you say a little bit about references to previous Christmas movies, such as Newell Post from It's a Wonderful Life?
Yeah, so it again, when you look at the history of Hollywood films, it is building on those, and that really ties into again with plot versus story. So when we see "It's a Wonderful Life" on there, we instantly make those connections and we make those comparisons,
Hmm.
and that absolutely was obviously super intentional. They put it into the film, but not just that. That's part. So like that freeze frame I did look like a Norman Rockwell. I mean, that could have been from a 1940s Christmas movie as
Hmm.
well. They absolutely were referencing previous films that had already established, what families need to look like, what the dynamic is, the lighting, the costumes. They are referencing that over and over. I mean, Chevy Chase wearing the fur coat. and the hat, even that is referencing, like some of the divas from the Hollywood era. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
absolutely is fully intentional.
Yep, absolutely. So a couple more comments and then we'll let everybody go. So this question was, what was the first movie considered to be a Christmas movie?
That is a great question. And sadly, I don't have a very specific answer, because this is one of the things I love about film history, is that they're always finding an earlier film. So I've talked about this before, and with students, like I brought up this silent film from 1901, and it, reputable company and all this, it said, oh yeah, this was the first one. And then I started digging into it more, and like, oh no, this one came out in 1899. And so there's a constant kind of debate going on, like which is the official first one. But there was this one that did The Night Before Christmas in 1901, and it's about 30 seconds long. You can find it on YouTube, and that for many historians, that's because it's referencing again. See, that's the other thing that Christmas films are pulling from, is also literature. There's so many great Christmas stories that come from literature. Christmas Carol being one of the greatest ever, of course, that just gets done over and over and over. And what Dickens was examining there set the tone, not just for literature, but for film as well. And so, that's been used over and over and over.
Absolutely. And as we end, this is more of a comment from from somebody watching. It says, this year will be our 21st annual Christmas vacation PJ party with two other dear families of theirs. And now their kids have joined. And it's the first Christmas event that gets put on the calendar each December. So it's really neat. Really neat to see that kind of tradition continue. 21 years, that's awesome.
That's amazing. Maybe they've got the little Wally World drinking cups, drink the eggnog.
I hope they've got them all.
I love those illusions. Again, there's so much in it. It's again, rewatch it with family. It's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. Hey, well, Gareth, again, thank you so much. We hope you have a Merry Christmas. We appreciate you coming and joining us tonight. Wonderful information about a wonderful movie. And we hope to have you back again soon to talk other movies.
Happy to do it. Always love to talk about movies. Thank you.
I love it. Well, a quick reminder, tonight's presentation will be uploaded onto our website tomorrow. Live attendees will get an email once the link is ready. Meanwhile, here are a few upcoming webinars for you. Start the year off with a cup of ambition. Lessons learned from starting a small business. Join us Thursday, January 11th, as we welcome small business owners Jill Marlar and James Little as they discuss the truths of opening a business. Then, UAB Employee Wellness Manager Emily Davidson will be here on Thursday, January 18th. She'll present Eating Well on a Budget, wallet-friendly strategies for nutritious meals. And on Monday, February 12th, Dr. Lizzie Davis will return for the Science of Chocolate, Melting the History and Science. This webinar will mark the return of our popular The Science of series. And lastly, on Tuesday, March 5th, come back for our webinar, UAB Alumni Career Design Fellowship, How to Design a Career You Love. Steph Zuck, Director of Career Programs with Mission Collaborative, will take us through the basics of a 4-step career process. Check out these and more at uabalumni.edu/events. Finally, let us know how we're doing and what you would like to see. The QR code on your screen takes you to a very short survey. Share your thoughts with us, and as we continue to offer virtual presentations like tonight's. Again, thank you for joining us. Merry Christmas, and as always, go Blazers.
Thanks again, Mac. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Gareth. Have a wonderful night, my man.
All right. We'll talk to you again later.
See you later.